Over the last few weeks, I've recreated some really beautiful high-end decor using Dollar Tree finds, thrifted pieces, and things I already had at home. I've always believed you don't need a designer budget to create a home that feels beautiful. You just need to learn how to see the potential in everyday things. So today I'm sharing 25 of my favorite designer-inspired DIYs and transformations. A plastic mirror becomes a vintage-inspired frame. Dollar Tree birds ended up looking like something straight out of Pottery Barn, and a $5.99 thrifted shelf accidentally solved one of the biggest eyesores in my living room. These are the kind of projects that make a home feel personal, collected, and full of character without spending a fortune. Now grab your coffee, get comfy, and let's dive in. So when I spotted this dot frame at Pottery Barn, I immediately wanted to recreate it. There's something about the texture of those raised dots against a gold frame that looks so collected and elevated. And I've actually done a similar version before using pearl vase filler from Dollar Tree, and that one turned out beautifully. This time I wanted to try something different and see if I could get even closer to the Pottery Barn look. I found these thumbtacks at Dollar Tree, and honestly, the moment I saw them, I thought, that's it. I grabbed a pack along with this gold frame and went to work. Now, I'm not gonna lie, at first it was a little bit of a struggle getting them in, but once I slowed down and used the leverage from my silicone mat, pushing them down with steady pressure, they went in perfectly every time. And I did run out of tacks before I finished, so I filled in the last two spots with some of my pearl fillers, and honestly, they were the exact same size, so you'd never know. You could actually use either one or even mix them, but I have to say, the tacks feel so much sturdier in the frame, and I think they'll hold up beautifully long term. All that was left was to give it a coat of spray paint. I used Hammer Gold by Behr, and just like that, we were done. And here's the Pottery Barn version, and here's my version. These little birds I have a soft spot for. I actually made them over in a previous video to look like stone, and I loved how they turned out. But when I saw Pottery Barn's brass decorative birds, a set of 3 for $129, I thought I have to try this. One bird from Dollar Tree is $1.25, so for $3.75 you can create the whole set, but I only wanted one. And here's where the project almost ended up in the trash. You see, I sprayed them gold first, and because they're made of velvet, they just absorbed the paint and turned brown. So I tried hand painting them instead, and somehow they got even darker. But I had a light bulb moment, so I pulled out the Mod Podge and gave them a good coat and let them dry completely. Then I went in with some enamel gold craft paint, and I honestly couldn't believe how they turned out. The surface finally had something to grab onto, and the gold just popped. Sometimes the projects that almost don't make it in the end up being the best ones. And here's the Pottery Barn version, and here's my version. I saw this faux Renunculus rose arrangement from Arhaus selling for $333, regularly priced at almost $500, and that's for the small version. I honestly couldn't believe it, especially because I already had everything at home to make something so similar. The flowers that I'm using actually came from my son's wedding, but you can recreate this using faux Renunculus stems easily found online, and I'll link some below. For the vase, I reused an old glass container from one of the large Bath & Body Works candles, and then I poured some clear glue from Dollar Tree to create that faux water look, which is a much cheaper option to epoxy resin. Once the glue was in, I arranged the flowers and let everything start setting up. Now, depending on the humidity and temperature where you live, this can take quite a while to fully dry. Mine has been sitting for about a week and it's almost there. So definitely plan ahead if you're making one as a gift or centerpiece. But honestly, I think this arrangement turned out stunning. And because I use similar flowers and a similar shape, it gives such a high-end designer look for a fraction of the price. And here's the Arhaus version, and here's mine. Now, Pottery Barn has these gorgeous picture rails, and I've been eyeing them for a while. But here's what they don't tell you up front. That $99 price tag, that's just for the rail. The frames aren't included, and it's smaller than what they have pictured. They are actually showing 2 rails. So I decided to challenge myself and try to recreate this using Dollar Tree supplies. I also had a reason I really wanted to make this work. I've been wanting to display photos from my son's wedding, and nothing I'd seen felt quite right, but this did. And Dollar Tree has these black frames with white mats that look so similar to the Pottery Barn ones. And since it's spring, they had the hanging basket chains in the garden section, and that chain style was exactly what I was drawn to. So I picked up a couple of pieces of wood, some command strips, and book rings from the school supply section. When I got home, I played around with the layout for a while, probably longer than anything else in this video. I took a photo of the final layout so that I could refer back to it as I put everything together. I really recommend this step so you're not second guessing yourself, and you can easily make all your measurements when putting everything together. So once I had my layout, I stained the 2 pieces of wood, then glued them together. I always stain before I glue whenever I can because the stain won't take to the glue line. It just looks more finished that way. Now for the hardware detail. I wanted strips wrapping around the wood to mimic the metal hardware on the Pottery Barn version. I had some faux leather vinyl in my stash from Crafter Square. I'm not sure if they carry it anymore, and if you can't find it, you could use craft sticks painted black and cut to fit around the board, or pick up some faux leather ribbon from Amazon, which is pretty inexpensive. With both options, you'll still get a very similar look. After I cut my strips and attached them with Gorilla Glue epoxy, I secured the strips with some clothespins. The metal clamps from Dollar Tree were making marks in the faux leather. For hanging, I used command strip hooks with metal pieces from my stash that I pulled apart from the plastic hanger and then spray painted them black. But you could use the Dollar Tree command strip hooks and paint them black. Once everything was dry, I measured out the garden chain, and 1 package was actually enough for my layout. For the larger horizontal photo, I used a double chain, and I used eye hooks to attach everything to the frame and to the book rings, which I also spray painted black. Dollar Tree has actually been out of their picture hanging kits for a while, but you can grab eye hooks on Amazon for about $5 and you'll have 90 left over. They'll actually come in handy for the holidays for ornaments, so I know I'll use them and they won't go to waste. Now, the day before I started, I ordered my prints from Walgreens so they'd be ready for pickup when the project was done. Nothing worse than finishing something and not having the last piece. Oh, and if you use Walgreens, always have a quick Google search to find the current coupon code. I was able to save 40% on my prints. Now, one thing I might do differently next time, I'd use 4 pieces of wood instead of 2, just to give the rail a little more thickness. But honestly, I'm so happy with how this turned out. And it's hanging in my home now, and every time I walk past it, I smile. And here's Pottery Barn's version, and here's my version. So my last trip to Dollar Tree, I noticed these melamine trays. They are super cute as is, but I immediately knew what I wanted to do with them. You see, Pottery Barn has these beautiful enamel style trays out right now, and they are about the same size. So of course, I had to add it to cart to DIY. The first thing I did when I got it home was to take it outside and flip it over and give the back a coat of gold spray paint. Then I sprayed the front with white to cover the original design. It took a couple of coats, but once it was done, I had a clean blank canvas. Here's the technique I wanted to share because it's a game changer for napkin and tissue paper projects. Instead of Mod Podging directly onto the napkin, which causes a lot of wrinkles, I Mod Podged the tray first and let it dry completely. So then we were ready to move on. My daughter-in-law had made a phone stand from my previous video using Lily Pulitzer napkins, and she left one behind. The second I saw it against the tray, I knew it was meant to be. You could also use Dollar Tree tissue paper. This one they have out right now is beautiful. I cut the napkin down a little and separated it just to the printed layer. positioned it exactly where I wanted it, covered it with parchment paper, and used a dry iron. I have a Cricut iron, but Amazon has a very inexpensive craft irons for around $10 to $15. What the iron does is reactivate the Mod Podge and bond the napkin to the surface with fewer wrinkles. It's not going to be absolutely perfect, and that's okay. That's part of its charm. But it's also so much smoother than the traditional method. And now that the napkin is attached to the tray, I cut off any excess and sand the rest using my finger sander in a downward direction. And I will have all the supplies linked in the description box below. I then just took the iron and sealed the edges. Once the napkin was set, I went around the rim with a gold metallic paint pen from Dollar Tree. That edge detail is what gives the enamel tray that look and mimic the Pottery Barn version. To seal everything, I Mod Podged the rim first, keeping my brush away from the napkin because the pen does bleed. Then with a clean brush, I gently Mod Podged over the napkin. You have to be gentle here so you don't tear it, and you will see some wrinkles and bubbling, but don't panic. Just trust the process and let it dry completely. I gave mine about 3 hours, then went back over the whole thing with parchment paper and the iron one more time to smooth everything out. And like I said, it won't be perfect, but it still looks beautiful, and I love it. Now here's the Pottery Barn version, and here's mine. Now, Pottery Barn does these beautiful candle cloches, and I've been obsessed with them. The glass, the gold hardware detail on top is just perfect. But Dollar Tree actually has many glasses that would make a great cloche. Of course, they're smaller than the Pottery Barns, but you can still elevate a candle with them. And even Dollar Tree candles have come a long way. These small ones with the wooden lid, with the simple gold trimmed label, are totally the Pottery Barn aesthetic. So I wanted to see if I could bring the whole look together, and for the top detail, I decided to use wooden beads and small wooden slices, glued them together after I filled the hole in the bead and painted them gold to mimic the hardware look on the Pottery Barn version. And just a quick tip, Dollar Tree has these body oils right now with a beautiful round gold top, and they would be absolutely perfect for the top of a cloche. You might want a slightly larger base to balance it, but they are gorgeous. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. Once those tops were completely dry, I attached them to the bottom of the glass with E6000. And here's the Pottery Barn version, and here's my version. Now this next one I couldn't believe. Cut glass decanters in Dollar Tree? Have you seen these yet? I grabbed a few to tuck away for the holidays because I think they'll make the most gorgeous little gifts. But of course we need to keep a couple to style with. They are so amazing. But what I really can't get over is how much they look like Pottery Barn's decanter. The baby version, yes, but so what? Because here's the thing, you don't need to put this on your bar. That's expected. Style it somewhere unexpected instead. In your bathroom with mouthwash or on your nightstand with a small glass, it looks like something out of a boutique hotel. Now, if you need a large drink in the middle of the night, this won't work for you. But if you just need a little water to take your supplements or medication, it's absolutely perfect. And here's the Pottery Barn version, and here's the Dollar Tree version. Pottery Barn does frames so beautifully, and I recently came across this bamboo style that I just love, but with a coat of gold spray paint, this Dollar Tree frame goes from silver to something that gives you that same warm, organic feel. Now here's the Pottery Barn version, and here's my version. When I was at Dollar Tree the other day, I was so happy to see that they brought back these beautiful mirrors because they remind me so much of the LoveShackFancy frames Pottery Barn carries. And last year, I actually turned one into framed artwork using a Dollar Tree canvas. But this time, I wanted to make an actual standing picture frame. First, I gave the mirror a quick coat of champagne bronze spray paint by Restyle to tone down the bright plastic finish and make it look a little more high-end. And for the picture, I chose one of my favorite photos from my son's wedding. I almost always order my prints from Walgreens because they constantly run photo specials, and right now all prints are 50% off, so definitely check online for coupon codes before ordering. This time I went with a sepia matte finish, and I love how soft and vintage it feels in this frame. Then all we needed to do was add a kickstand since the mirror doesn't have one. So I grabbed an old frame from my stash, removed the backing, and used E6000 to attach the stand right to the back of the mirror, making sure everything lined up correctly before gluing it down. And honestly, this little frame turned out so beautiful. And here's the LoveShackFancy version, and here's mine. This next project was inspired by Lulu and Georgia's bowl candle holders, which retail for $74 each. And honestly, once I realized how simple the shape was, I knew this would be such an easy DIY. I started with these tiny glass bowls from Dollar Tree that come in a pack of 4. I've heard people call them pinch bowls, ramekins, even monkey dishes, but whatever you call them, they were the perfect size for this project. Then for the base, I used a couple of PVC caps I already had left over in the garage from another project, but you could use little candle cups or couplings too. I actually found a 30-pack on Amazon that are really inexpensive. So all I did was glue the cap into the bowl with some E6000, and then I gave everything a few coats of black spray paint to add depth, and then some gold rub and buff. What I love most about these are how customizable they are. You can make a whole set for the center of a dining room table, change the color for different seasons, or even use them for weddings, baby showers, and birthdays. Really, any event in any color. And because they're so inexpensive to make, you could easily create a collection without spending a fortune. Now here's the Lulu and Georgia's version, and here's mine. This next one isn't exactly a designer dupe, but it was way too good not to include because this thrift find accidentally solved one of the biggest eyesores in my living room. So when I spotted this ornate shelf at the thrift store, I immediately threw it in my cart. I see these shelves all the time, but they're usually white. I don't think I've ever found one in this beautiful wood tone before, and for $5.99, I honestly couldn't leave it behind. The funny part was I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do with it yet. I just knew I loved it. Once I got home, I looked them up online and couldn't believe the resale prices. Similar shelves were selling anywhere from around $100 all the way up to $500. And I remember seeing Kenzie Marie on Instagram turn one upside down and use as a book display, and it looked gorgeous. Then I thought maybe I could style it on the stove. I also considered using it underneath the microwave because it added such a pretty architectural detail. But then I looked over at my soundbar and suddenly I thought, wait, is this long enough to cover it? And I'm not even kidding. I did a full happy dance when it fit perfectly. And because of the cutout design, the sound still comes through perfectly, but now instead of staring at a black box, it just looks like part of the decor, and I just love it. But before we jump into the next project, if you've been enjoying these designer-inspired DIYs and thrift flips, it would mean so much to me if you would like, comment, share, and subscribe because it truly helps support my channel. Ironically, at the same thrift store, I also found this empty silverware case that immediately made me think of the Magnolia wall cabinets I've been wanting to recreate to cover our alarm system. I could have easily built a simple box for it, but the shape of this case was just so beautiful and lightweight, and since it already opened with hinges, I knew it would be perfect. You could also recreate this project in other ways too, even using a regular frame like I did in my previous video when I turned my grandmother's vintage sequins purse into a shadow box art. But I really wanted to challenge myself and see if I could transform the silverware case instead. So the first thing I needed to do was remove the back and strip off the old finish. I used the same spray stripper from my last video, spraying it directly into a plastic bag with the case inside. And honestly, the bag trick works so much better than plastic wrap because it kept everything wet and active longer. Most of the finish scrape dried off, but I did have to go back over a few areas outside. The only problem was underneath was a very cherry-toned wood, which doesn't really work with the rest of my decor. So instead of restaining it traditionally, I used a dark wax to tone down some of that red and give it a richer, deeper wood tone. Then for the front frame, I used another thrifted find from my stash. A local thrift store had actually been giving away framed art for free, which still feels crazy to me, but I happily brought home a few. This frame didn't need stripping, thankfully, just a really good sanding to remove the finish. Now the challenge became finding artwork for the front. At first I found a print of an entryway that felt somewhat fitting since this cabinet is going into our entryway. But while digging through the framed art at Goodwill, I came across this other print that completely stopped me. Art doesn't speak to me very often, but something about this one did. It reminded me so much of the Amalfi Coast with the soft Mediterranean colors and the woman sitting outside with a coffee. And when I looked it up later, I found out other prints of this artwork were actually selling for around $150. So of course I carefully framed it, but I decided not to use glass because I didn't want the extra weight on the door, and I also didn't want glare covering the artwork. Then, instead of permanently attaching the frame, I used these removable picture strips I found at Dollar Tree in the hardware section. And if you see these, grab them because they worked incredibly well. That way, I could still swap out the artwork later if I ever want to change the look. And honestly, that flexibility made this feel even more custom. I didn't do anything fancy on the inside because its only real job is hiding the alarm panel. Although technically, I could always add a shelf later for extra storage. But for now, I just love that instead of staring at an ugly alarm system, we now have something that actually feels beautiful and warm in the space. And here's the Magnolia-inspired version, and here's my take on it. This next project was inspired by this little 3-footed glass bowl I spotted at Dollar Tree. The second I saw it, I immediately thought this could totally become one of those stone Molcajete bowls you see at Mexican restaurants holding salsa and guacamole. But if you try buying one from places like Williams-Sonoma, they can cost well over $60, and even online at Walmart, I was seeing versions anywhere from $40. So to recreate that stone texture, I mixed up a homemade version of Mod Podge using glue and water, plus some baking soda and a little black paint. I made the mixture about the consistency of pancake batter, and the glue mixture really helps everything adhere nicely to the glass. Now the first coat is going to look pretty transparent. After building it up with about 3 coats, it really starts developing that textured stone appearance. Then for the final step, I dabbed on a softer gray color to give it more dimension and make it look a little more natural. The Williams-Sonoma version is actually a bit lighter than mine, but honestly, I ended up preferring the darker charcoal tone. And here's the inspiration, and here's my version. Now technically, this isn't food safe anymore because of the finish, but I absolutely love it for storing garlic, and I think the color of the garlic looks pretty and organic against the darker bowl. It also looks beautiful styled with a little succulent on the windowsill. Now the LoveShackFancy collaboration at Pottery Barn just keeps getting better and better. I completely fell in love with their bathroom accessories because they're so soft, feminine, and vintage inspired. And I knew we could recreate a similar look using a few simple Dollar Tree supplies. In Dollar Tree's party section, they have these scallop containers that have such a similar silhouette to the LoveShackFancy trash can. And then for the makeup brush holder, I used one of Dollar Tree's glass candle holders that they have carried forever because the shape was almost perfect. The first step was to give both pieces a few coats of white spray paint, and once that dried, it was time to start adding the floral details using some napkins I already had in my stash from another project. These napkins are 2-ply, so you'll want to separate and remove the bottom layer first. Then, to avoid harsh cut lines around the flowers, I like using little water paintbrush from Dollar Tree with water to gently trace around the design before tearing it out. You can also just use your finger dipped in water if that's easier. Then, using my homemade Mod Podge mixture, equal parts glue and water, I started layering the flowers onto both pieces. Once everything was completely dry, I sealed them with a matte Rust-Oleum clear coat. Since these are going into a bathroom, they may occasionally get wet. And I'll link everything I used in the description box below. And here's the LoveShackFancy inspiration, and here are my versions. I honestly love how delicate and pretty these turned out. This next project was also inspired by the LoveShackFancy floral pillar candles from Pottery Barn, but those candles can run anywhere from $25 to $40 each, and since we already have plenty of floral napkins left over, this felt like the perfect project to use them on. And if you've happened to see my Halloween video, you may recognize the same technique because I used it then to make decorative Halloween candles too. For these, I started with the Dollar Tree LED pillar candles, this time using both sizes in white. Then, using only the top printed layer of the napkin, I wrapped the design around the candle with a piece of wax paper over the top. Using my mini craft iron on low heat, I slowly ironed the napkin directly into the candle. As the wax warms up, it grabs the napkin and almost embeds the design right into the surface. Once everything was attached, I trimmed the top and bottom edges as closely as possible, and to finish off the top edge, I lightly ran the iron around it one last time so those tiny edges melted down smoothly into the candle. And here's the LoveShackFancy version, and here's mine. At my local thrift store, I spotted this round cheesecake pan with a removable bottom for $1, and immediately it reminded me of the round trays Pottery Barn carries. I have several versions of these trays, and I thought it would be such a fun way to recreate a similar look on a budget. What I love most, though, was the removable insert because it gives you so many options later on. You could cover it with fabric, wallpaper, scrapbook paper, even something playful like those CB2 monkey trays, or swap it out seasonally with holiday prints or decorative paper. The possibilities are really endless. Before painting the tray, I pulled some handles from my stash. At first, I tried gluing them on, but that definitely didn't work, so I ended up drilling and screwing them into the tray instead, which was pretty simple. Then all it needed was a few coats of spray paint to give it that warmer metallic finish, and that was it. This picnic basket sits by our front door and has been one of the easiest ways to keep shoes under control because somehow nobody minds tossing them in there. The problem was I completely ruined the finish the last time I tried to DIY it, and I really didn't like the way it looked. So I finally gave it a quick refresh with this beautiful spray paint from Rust-Oleum in the color Brown Bear, which is new to me. And now I'm honestly obsessed with the color. So with just a little paint and about 10 minutes, this eyesore doesn't look like an eyesore anymore. I now needed to turn my attention to this shelf, which has gone through so many different looks over the years. Last year, I tried a glaze technique on it, and honestly, I just never liked the finish. So it's been sitting upside down on the floor in our guest bath for over a year. But I still love the piece itself, so I decided to completely refresh it with a special walnut stain to have a more Magnolia look. And the color instantly felt so much better. I also wanted to add hooks to the bottom using the pegs of a peg rail I found at Goodwill last year. The only problem was the pegs were covered in this super glossy paint that wouldn't sand off, and they wouldn't take stain either. So at Home Depot, I found a spray version of the citrus stripper I already use all the time, and I honestly was shocked by how well it worked. I sprayed the pegs inside a plastic bag, let them sit for about an hour, and most of the paint practically wiped right off. And now I actually think I like this version even better than the brush-on stripper. Once the pegs were stained and attached, the piece finally started feeling like something I'd actually enjoy. Now the shelf still needs a few finishing touches, but before we come back to style it, my ADD got the better of me, and I started another little project that ended up becoming one of my favorites in this whole video because it solved such a simple everyday problem for us. Problem that drives us crazy is that we can never remember the movies people recommend to us or ones we see advertised that we actually want to watch. Then we end up spending more time trying to pick a movie than actually watching one. So when I found this vintage jar in my stash, I thought it would be the perfect place to keep all of our movie ideas in one spot. Someone had already DIY'd the lid with gold, green, and red paint, which is not my vibe, but a little Spanish copper rub and buff completely transformed it. Then I tied some suede ribbon around the top, which I've already used in so many projects around our house. I swear this ribbon has been one of the best little inexpensive craft supplies I've ever bought. For the movie picks, I coffee stained some Dollar Tree craft sticks so they'd feel a little more warm and vintage, but this step is totally optional. Then I started writing down the movies we always want to watch. I added some blank sticks and tucked them in with a Sharpie so there are no excuses. And honestly, I love this little thing way more than I expected to. And now movie night will be more enjoyable and I can be making popcorn and settling in instead of scrolling and making decisions. Last year, I painted our builder grade guest bathroom cabinets green and added peel and stick trim to make them feel a little more custom. While I was deciding between two different size knobs, I left both on the cabinet for a while to see which one I liked better. And funny enough, I ended up liking the smaller knob much more because bigger definitely wasn't better in this case. The problem was, once I made the decision, I never got around to swapping out the other one. And every single time I walked in here, I thought, I really need to fix that someday. So I decided to see how long this project would actually take me, and including touching up the paint, swapping the knob, and putting everything back together, the entire thing took 3 minutes and 10 seconds. 3 minutes! I put this tiny project off for almost a year, and now every time I walk in, I'm so happy I finally did it. This next project actually started with this old lumbar pillow from my chair makeover and these woven Dollar Tree floor mats that have been sitting in my stash forever. But recently I saw a Magnolia pillow that looked so similar to this woven pattern, and then I realized these mats fit this pillow almost perfectly. Originally, I was planning to use them as a basket liner or maybe placemats, but this ended up being so much better. Since I don't sew, I just grabbed my Dollar Tree hot glue sticks and glued everything together right on the pillow. The little crafter square clamps made this project super easy because I could just move them along as I glued. And because of the fringe, I actually glued everything from the outside instead of turning it inside out like a normal pillow covering. The whole thing came together in maybe 20 minutes. And now I finally get to use both the pillow and these woven mats that had been sitting in my stash forever. The next project I wanted to tackle was this bench, which has gone through quite a few looks over the years. At one point, I gave it more of a shabby chic farmhouse look, but lately it just felt too light for my living room. So I decided to completely sand it down and try to create a deeper, more primitive wood tone instead. I started with the stained Special Walnut, but it ended up pulling a lot more red than I wanted. So I layered the color Jacobean over the top to bring in some darker, richer tones that would work better with my antique fireplace. And honestly, this ended up feeling so much more like me. Now instead of standing out in the room, it actually feels like it belongs there. It's amazing how changing one finish can completely change the feeling of a piece. Back to the finishing touches for the bathroom shelf. I decided to make a couple quick pieces of art using Dollar Tree book and some frames I already had in my stash. I picked these images because of the soft greens and vintage feel. They worked perfectly with the direction I wanted for the bathroom. One of the frames was already gold and the other one was black, but neither finish really worked for the space. So I mixed a little antique gold rub and buff with a few drops of burnt umber to tone down the gold. And honestly, that tiny change made such a big difference. This project was super quick and easy, but it ended up being exactly what the shelf needed to start feeling finished. And before we could finish styling the shelf, there was one more thing I wanted to update. This basket from Michaels had a really bright gold finish that just didn't work with the softer tones I wanted in here anymore. So I gave it a couple of coats of watered down Waverly wax to tone everything down, and it was such an easy fix. Once that dried, we were finally ready to style the shelf. And here's how everything finally came together. I love that this piece is finally off the floor, but even more than that, I love how calm and finished the space feels now. The wood tone is exactly what I was hoping for. The soft greens work so beautifully in here, and it honestly feels like a completely different piece now. It's amazing what a few small projects and a couple of hours can do. And now, every time I walk into this bathroom, it just feels peaceful. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next Saturday.